Hey out there, welcome to Modern Macroeconomics, and in this lecture in particular, we're going to focus on New Classical Macroeconomics. Our Modern Macro lecture series is really going to focus on the macroeconomics of post, say, the 1970s and the falling apart of the original interpretation of the Phillips curve. Our Modern Macro is really a micro-foundations-based macroeconomics, where we're going to have to build in some micro-foundations like expectations. So without further ado, let's get started. So as we move out of the 1970s, we see the end of the original Keynesian consensus. We had stagflation in the 1970s, and the original Phillips curve interpretation falls apart as we see the data from the 1970s. The death of the consensus really comes at the hand of adding expectations into our models. We're thinking about how individuals act and interact with one another. So in short, we're adding micro foundations to our macroeconomics, right? So in the 1970s through the 1990s, we see the development of a lot of new theories that come about. There's lots of nuanced theories, but what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of focus on some broad categories that we could clump these theories into. At the heart of these movements was often an outgrowth of the errors of the past. At the heart of this new outgrowth was the fact that we all needed to have some micro foundations. The Lucas critique had changed macroeconomics. And what had emerged? Well, it was kind of a similar debate to what we had before, but with updated ideas. We were moving from classical versus Keynesian economics to new classical versus new Keynesian economics. The new Keynesian ideas refocus their attention on why recessions occur in the first place. You see these declines in aggregate demand causing drops in real output, and thus drops in employment as well. So very much so aggregate demand focused here again. But now new explanations come in and talk about wages being rigid in the downward direction. Wage stickiness prevents this correction mechanism of the economy, and it allows for recessions to occur. We're modeling micro markets of how wages interact with individual behaviors and can cause recessions or depressions. So we have these micro markets built into our macro stories. New Keynesian economics also use the micro foundation of rational expectation theory. This doesn't usually seem to fit in with Keynesian economics because you can think of the bias of animal spirits and things like that. But new Keynesian economics is actually going to find some ways to work rational expectations into the model. On the flip side is going to be that new classical macro. New classical macro is going to build its core ideas off of the kind of standard neoclassical microeconomic framework of market competition. It's going to emphasize the importance of rigorous foundations of microeconomics, and in particular, rational expectations theory. The major difference between the new Keynesian and the new classical views could be summed up with this metaphor of a car. The new Keynesians say that the problem is with the car itself. The car is kind of the economy, or the engine is the economy, and there's something wrong in that engine. And so we want to just kind of tinker around with that. It's coming from within the system. There's problems that can be had. The new classicals, on the other hand, say that the problem is with the driver of the car. We have bad government policy steering us around. Or perhaps the problem is some outside accident, like a bus sideswiping our car and causing problems. So it could be from exogenous shocks to the economy. The new Keynesians think of the economy as an old beat-up car, very susceptible to breaking down, and we need to tinker with it and correct it and fix it up. The new classicals view the economy as a nice, new, finely tuned automobile moving right along, but it's subject to outside forces and bad driving. Click here for more videos in modern macroeconomics. The next one will take you to a lecture on new classical macroeconomics.